The music starts when I turn to the page featuring images of people interacting. Also, the word freedom seems to be written all around it. The word seems to coincide with what the deists had just obtained. Also around this time, Zion started a trio of principles for the deists to go by. He called it the honor system, and the first two parts were power and freedom. Though it seems their newfound freedom wasn't the easiest to use. While traveling from the corporation, they wandered into a small town. The citizens here weren't exactly used to the deists' way of life and stereotyped them as savages or monsters.
Yeah, I think there can be stereotypes of artists, for sure.
I think there's a look that people perceive would indicate that you're an artist.
Which aren't all without reason. You know, a lot of artists tend to be hipsters.
I don't think there's a necessary set or look that someone can have that makes them an artist. You know, you always see a lot of artists look alike. The poofy hair or the eccentric clothing. But I don't think really any of that plays into what makes an artist an artist. That's just the way we want to be seen by the rest of the world.
I think that people still have those weird ideas that if you look a certain way, you're an artist.
But I've met, you know, people who you would call civilians, you know, that still do art. Like I work at an improv theater, and a lot of the improvisers there have, you know, like architectures or work at offices as secretaries and have that civilian life.
All in all, it was just a huge divide that needed to be overcome.
The gap between an artist and his fans or viewers or supporters is a very weird one.
I don't feel a separation from them so much as I think it might be the opposite way around.
I've experienced that not necessarily directly from being an artist, but just from being a creative person. You're not always looked at the same way as somebody else that, you know, is more normal.
I've been in relationships where, you know, I've had things said to me just like, well, you know, why don't you come in the house? You've been in the studio all day. I can't. I'm working on something. Leave me alone. I'll be in an hour, you know? And then an hour passes, and it's just like, you said you were coming in an hour. I know, I'm sorry. It's not going to happen.
I use that, you know, that term civilians, man. They don't understand the way we think.
We can be very selfish people. You know, the arts is, it's a bitchy mistress, you know, and whoever you end up with has to understand that there's going to be times that it's like, no, I don't want to go to dinner with my in-laws because I want to spend the day in the studio, or, you know, I want to watch this opera, or, you know, whatever.
And that's just what it is. I mean, you have some people who are very much art enthusiasts. They don't have to be artists, but they really know what it is. They know how to support, and they know how to embrace what you do. But the average person, the average civilian, they don't. You're speaking a foreign language.
Their art did make it easier for others to understand them, but not everyone. The deists became popular around the town and received a lot of accolades and praise. Some citizens tried copying the deist art, but with terrible results. Most did so just to receive the same popularity as the artists.
It is that preconception, that disposition that's art is easy, you know, or art is a ripoff, or my kid could do that. You know, I think it's that idea that makes that rift.
You know, it's frustrating when people underestimate the work that you have to do as an artist, and think that they can just do it.
Most civilians, government officials, politicians, they just think it's a hobby, something you do for fun. Oh, okay, yeah, go play with that paint. But not understanding that it's something you have to get out.
I think people just don't realize, as far as from the actor's point of view, people don't realize what goes into it and how much energy and how much of yourself you have to put into it.
If you're a painter, you know, and you go to the store to get paint, and you come back and you realize that the one color that you really need isn't in your bag, that can wreck your whole afternoon, you know? Or if you're a dancer and you come back from a really terrible injury and your dance professor says, you're doing great, that can make your week. It's very difficult at times for people who are not in the creative fields to kind of understand the nuances of that, you know, how people can stew over things and just be enraged because they had a bad day at the studio or they had a bad day in the mixing booth.
I mean, you got some artists that go down some very disrupting mental paths. I mean, look at Van Gogh, look at Heath Ledger. Both, you know, mentally sacrificed a lot for their art.
Being an artist, you have to be extremely passionate about some medium and then want to work in that medium. But then people who aren't, they don't have that passion for something, they just don't really care.
I think people look at artists and they get this crazy idea that they're all famous, you know, that everybody that starts off as an artist is one day gonna be the next Shepherd.
Well, everybody wants to be famous, you know. They want to come up with the next big idea or the next regime-changing project that just blows people's minds. Everyone wants to be famous.
That happens to musicians. That happens when people sign record deals. They have this creative gift, and they are able to communicate and influence people. And that influence is sometimes used for negative intentions, so that others can benefit. It's almost like a parasitic relationship.
Is that what you're going for? Like, is your whole purpose of being an artist so you can get famous and so people will see your name and juxtapose and high fructose? Is that why you become an artist? That's just weird.
But if you look at, what's a popular artist? Kurt Cobain, how fame affected him. It wore on his mental, depression hit, and then he ended up committing suicide.
And that's where you have to ask yourself, like, what's the price of my soul?
I'm sure that there are cases where artists have gotten into their heads and stopped trusting themselves and focused more on, you know, the critics, that they lost what the art was and what it ever meant to them.
If you put out what you truly feel and people just don't get behind it, a lot of times some artists will take that to heart and they'll try to switch up and make hits.
And if something you're representing is not true to you, then that can hurt you over time, because when people see you, they're looking for that work. And you're like, that's not really my work. It's just some work that people associate with me because they like what I do, but really that's not my work.
Eventually people are gonna see through your crap, man. Or you're gonna have to just come to terms with yourself and start realizing that maybe this wasn't the best idea. You know, then you're gonna be at Starbucks wondering, you know, what the hell happened.
There are artists that I know who have received accolades and praise for certain types of work, certain bodies of work, certain pieces that they've done. And they've received public praise for it or monetary compensation for it. And it's an easy trap to fall into.
If you're looking for instant gratification, you're in the wrong business. You know, you don't get into this for that. I want to be rich and famous. Well, you don't need to be an artist. If you want to be an artist, you want to create work and have people see it, and that's your passion, then yeah, that's what you do.
I definitely know a lot of people that are just like, you know, I want to make money off my art. Yeah, I mean, sure, I can totally understand that. More power to you. Make money off your art, but at the same time, you gotta be ready to sacrifice certain things.
The money gonna come. That's a byproduct. You just do the work, and then once you done knocked out 20, 30 pieces, you got you a body of work to show, you know, that you're comfortable with. You'll make the money. That'll come, no doubt.
You know, you're not gonna do a couple great paintings and the next thing you know, you're the next big thing. It doesn't always work that way. Maybe for that Mr. What's his name from Exit Through the Gift Shop, maybe it worked for him for a certain period of time, but even that didn't last.
This art game is a patient game. It's a very patient, it's a mature person's game. So when you get in it, you expect to walk the long, hard road to become successful.
As a counter to the townspeople using their gifts for fame, some Dias put radical statements in their work of art, criticizing them on their actions as well as other factors they found negative.
I think artists can be extremely reckless in the way that they portray their views.
The term reckless, that's art, man. Art is reckless, you know, or it should be, supposed to be.
I think it's great when people express an opinion, and especially if there's something going on, whether it's personal politics, public politics, social injustice, things like that. I think that if they bring that to their art and it's a reflection of that, then I think that's wonderful. But there is responsibility that goes with it. You know, when you think about how uninformed people will potentially see your work, you have to keep in mind that they're going to draw some opinions. They're going to assume things that might not be accurate.
If you have a message and you're not going to be provocative, what's the point of you trying to put your message in your art?
To the artist, you know, I don't think there is ever too far, because clearly they're very passionate in saying what they're saying.
When you become an artist, when you step into the role of an artist, you have to take accountability and ownership of everything that you create.
Because you hear rappers and musicians say this all the time. It's in the hands of the parents. It ain't our fault what they watch and listen to. No, as an artist, you have to take a responsibility. Because what you're doing at the end of the day is you're casting a mirror up to society. You're giving them your views, and you're saying ultimately, like, this is what the world is.
How far is too far? Can you go too far if it's always for the art?
I'm gonna paraphrase Nathan McCall. When one's reality sucks, fantasy becomes a larger influence. And that fantasy in turn becomes our reality. So people idolize these people, and then they become them, or at least the idea that they see of them.
We look to art for the unfiltered message, for the unfiltered idea. I don't need artists to start watering down their ideas.
Years ago, when I was in graduate school at Florida State University, one of our professors, he was, in addition to being an installation artist, he was also a performance artist. And he had a persona that was very much his alter ego, his anti-ego, which is what he called it. And this professor was very liberal-minded, very politically liberal, very tolerant, very loving, generous man in his daily life. His anti-ego that he had developed was a Southern Baptist, hard-shelled Baptist preacher. Racist, sexist, homophobic, all the negative things. And he developed this persona as a response to people who actually embrace those beliefs. You know, almost as a means of like poking fun at it and drawing attention to the ridiculousness of it. And one year, for the faculty show, in this character, he drew out a big piece of paper, and on the paper he wrote out, in character, AIDS will cure them. And it was in reference to gay men, because at the time, gay men, HIV and AIDS were very much in the forefront of the media in terms of like, it's the gay plague and all the gay men are going to start dying now. And people who weren't aware of the fact that this was part of his persona, this was part of his performance, were incredibly offended and incredibly hostile and demanded that the work be taken down, when really he was making very interesting ties between that homophobic attitude and certain mindsets, you know, and people who didn't understand that he was mocking this mindset just got incredibly offended. And that's what I mean when I say that you have to have that responsibility. You have to know that people are going to take things the wrong way, take you out of context, make assumptions that aren't true. And you have to be prepared for that. And I'm not saying that you have to make sure that everyone gets what you're saying all the time, because that's impossible. But you do have to be prepared to talk about the work, to create a dialogue with your public. Because if you don't do that, then you're just making pretty pictures or pretty things to like put on your coffee table, you know, or nice elevator music.
The deists ended up splitting into two groups. Either they were seen as deists that made art just for popularity, or they were deists that made radical art with no consideration for others. They became very critical of each other's art, no matter how personal the piece was. Eventually, the once unified race split up into several smaller tribes with no connection to each other. The honor system died with their unity.
It's habitualized into our human nature that we want to put things in boxes and dichotomize things and separate things, and that's what language is. And that's why we're always going to be speaking different languages. Every single person's going to have an entirely different perspective on the exact same thing. I mean, I think that's the issue when it comes to things like religion, to philosophy, politics. We all have individualistic ways of seeing the exact same thing. So we're all stuck in this like labyrinth or Babylon, where we're all just yelling at each other in these foreign dialects.
They're just being closed-minded and more or less looking at everything through a tunnel. More or less tunnel vision is what they're inflicted with. They have tunnel vision. They don't see anything but their own media or their own process as being important.
I mean, all you hear the jokes all the time is, oh man, I've been working all day, like 18 hours. It's, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a filmmaker. Okay. Wait, what was that look? Oh, it's just, don't seem like you guys do a lot.
You know, when I tell people I'm a sculptor, they're just like, oh, what do you weld? It's like, actually, I don't do that. I make a whole bunch of stuff out of, you know, felt or yarn or a giant pillow that's in the shape of a vagina, you know, stuff like that. And that's when I usually get the oh.
A lot of people don't see filmmaking as an art form, and if they do, they don't respect it.
There have been people who are just like, well, that's not really sculpture. I'm like, okay, well then what is it? And then that's, well, I don't know, but it's not sculpture. It's like, so let me get this straight. Because it's not metal or wood or stone, it's not sculpture. And then they're just like, I gotta go. So, and I'm okay with that, you know, because if it's not sculpture, tell me what it is and I will reconsider. But until you can tell me what it is, shut up.
Hey, you know, filmmaking doesn't have so much physical, tactile expressions like painting or drawing, so it just gets slept on.
Car design is art. Fashion design is art. You know what I mean? If you want to get into that, everything in the world is art. You know, everything. You know, buildings, that's architecture, that's art. You know, hairdressers, barbers, those are artists. They're media, they're really sculptors. Their material is hair.
You know, if you're gonna be out there doing stuff, creating things, you have to be prepared for the fact that you're gonna hear it all.
The last time I did, I actually put up a website. This was probably 7 or 8 years ago. I put up a website with a lot of my paintings on it. And I don't know if he'll see this, but my best friend called me with some other good friends in the room and proceeded to make fun of just about everything I had up on the website. This looks like something a 13-year-old girl would do. Ha 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 ha. I mean, yeah, sure, it was funny in your room with all of your friends, but me sitting there, I'm like, wow, dude, that's what you think? And that's how you feel like I need to hear criticisms, like insults? And no, man. So 2 days later, that site was down. It's never been back up. Never will be. I don't think, at least. I don't think I ever will.